Be here. Okay, we're live.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Scholar Gypsies. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. I'm delighted. I'm delighted to have Hermann Kelly with me today. Sorry, now I got a bit of back there. I'm delighted to have Hermann Kelly here with me today. Leader, president, or we'll find out that in a few minutes, of the Irish Freedom Party. But first of all, I just want to say to new viewers that John Waters is joining the Scholar Gypsy. So there's a joint channel between John Waters and myself now. We're both writers on Substack. You can find John's writing on John Waters Unchained and mine on The West Awake. Um, anyone viewing, just like, subscribe, share today's videos with your groups if you so desire, and the live chat is on there, so super chats will be displayed across the screen as we go. And if you have any questions, we might try to get to one or two of them before we end. With all that said, welcome, Hermann. I suppose we could start. Just our conversation today is what is going on with the Irish Freedom Party? Are you still the president of the Irish Freedom Party?
That's a difficult.
I've lost you there.
Yeah, so I was just improving the Wi-Fi there.
Yeah.
Sadly for John Leahy and co, that they didn't reach the 2/3 majority needed in the vote to change the constitution. So technically, I still am the president of the Irish Freedom Party. But hey, you know what? For the next 3 months, there's going to be a group of 3 guys looking to achieve what they described as greater unionist, sorry, nationalist unity, in a union of nationalists in Ireland. And I should let it go, and I wish them all the best. I myself, I think this heave from outside the party, with the help of people like guys, Anthony Casey and Martin Murphy, who left the party on the verge of being kicked out of the party in December of last year, former members of the Irish Freedom Party. And they have gone through various groups, nationalist groups in Ireland over the last year, be that first it was Sinn Nadina Media, which was started by Eamon Murphy. Then they came into the Irish Freedom Party. They disrupted that. They tried to either bring it down or take it over, and they're still at that, of course. And then finally they moved on to Ireland First, which was started by Derek Bly. He was a bit tired of politics, but the way that it happened and the way that Irish First members were treated was very badly by Murphy and Casey. And I don't think what has happened in Ireland First is quite over yet, because I certainly know that people like the uh, deputy president of the party, Alico Maguire, etc., are very unhappy about what transpired in Ireland First. So I don't think that Casey and Murphy and co are out of the woods when it comes to that. So basically, they've gone through 3 different political nationalist groups in Ireland, and they've tried to either overtake them or bring them down. And that's still a matter in progress in the Irish Freedom Party. But I myself, I'm still a member of the Irish Freedom Party. I will remain a member of the Irish Freedom Party, and I will be helping to build up the party as best I can. Because what's that old one in quizzes? I've started, so I'll finish. I hope to increase the reach and vote of the Irish Freedom Party going forward. And the thing is, I'm very good friends, as I said, with nationalist leaders like Maliki Stein, with Derek Bly, with Gavin Pepper. And I think this heave-ho came at the very wrong time, because just as we were getting very close, and saying, look, guys, we should all be in the same political party, because there's not a snitch of difference in our political viewpoints. They're very, very similar. And really, it would be better off not as independents or as separate political parties, but as one unified political party. And so, well, hey, that still may happen in the very near future. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's not, the thing is, life, it's just not up to me. It's not all about me. There's many other people doing their own things and making their own decisions. and I have no control over that. People make up their own minds and they make their own choices of direction. So we'll have to see how it goes. But I'm pretty upbeat and pretty enthusiastic about the next few months.
Were you surprised by this? Did this take you by surprise? What happened? Or was there a build up? Could you see a build up coming
Mm,
to it?
yeah, well, the Casey and Murphy, I call them dumb and devious crew, that they basically they came. Now, I thought in my naivety, thought that this kind of ruptions within the party over the selection of the candidate for Carlo Kilkenny in the general election, which was between Orla Donoghue, who wasn't very capable, and Luke O'Connor, who's a very capable and intelligent guy, and a very straight guy as well. That I thought it was over this, and then so and so was friends with this person, that person, but no, I was completely wrong in that. What I found out, even in the last month, is that Casey and Co, especially Casey, came into the party at very short notice. I believe it was in May 2024. And by June 2024, they had a private WhatsApp group where they were talking on it behind my back and other people's backs. They had a little WhatsApp group among themselves of election candidates who were scheming and scamming to either take down or take over the Irish Freedom Party. And they had a meeting, a physical meeting in the 26th of July in Tipperary in July 26th, I believe. And then after the general election, they had a big heave ho where they basically threatened that I was going to step down and nominate Casey, or they were going to do this and they were going to do that to me, and they were going to humiliate me in public and all this. And I refused. And so off they went. And but Martin Murphy, the devious character, he is pretty cocky little, for a little runt of a guy. He's a very cocky little guy, and he put up in public that, oh yeah, well, we may have left, but we've left a number of our friends still inside the party and inside the Ard Chomhairle to do you damage. So that it was true. People like Owen O'Sullivan, etc., still who were in the Ard Chomhairle until recently, were there basically working for them, and he was there as the, let's say, the cat's paw for Michael Leahy, the guy who put this motion out in public into various groups, etc. And of course, if it had been something just to do with the party, it would only have been circulated among party members, but it wasn't. It was put out in public. It's not personal, but of course, Michael Leahy was very happy to mention my name every time it was brought up. And so I believe it was part of this Casey Murphy push to get, for them as two guys, to get control of the nationalist movement and their march through the various nationalist groups that we have in Ireland. But you know what? People have seen what they've been up to, and people are very unhappy. People outside the party as well are very unhappy what has transpired over the last number of months with this group of people. And I can tell you that Derek Bly, Maliki Stein, and Gavin Pepper, who rang me there on Sunday during the week as well, that they're not happy with what has transpired. So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Well, you just, based on everything you said there, you made a number of claims there, and that we will say, I'm sure other people on the other side of that might dispute some of them, but I'm not going to challenge you on them here. But all of this says to me, as somebody that's kind of looking at this, and I think a lot of people are like me, is that we're looking into the nationalist parties, the nationalist movements, the people that are, high profile on social media, and it just looks like a mess. It's like,
Yeah,
who do you
yeah,
trust? Who do you don't? Like,
yeah.
one question I would have for you here, because you mentioned Maliki Stein there and Gavin Pepper, they ran as independents in their election, got elected as independents, yet, and I'm only asking this as a question, why are they framed as part of the national movement if they're not like there's four national parties, and yet they're not? The way I look at what's happened in the electoral in the elections gone past, is the only people that got elected were people that were independent. Really?
I don't think any nationalist independent. Well, maybe in the local elections, yes,
Well,
but in the
no,
general election, there was no nationalist. Ostensibly, nationalist candidate was elected. There was 5 councillors, I believe. So it was Maliki Stein, Gavin Pepper, Patrick Quinlan, Glenn Moore, and Tom MacDonald.
they're all independent. Like, to classify, I'm not saying they're not nationalists, but they're not
Yeah.
members of any of the nationalist parties. Is my point.
Well, Patrick Quinlan was in the National Party, and Glenn Moore was in the Irish Freedom Party.
And Glenn, are they
What
still
was
in
Tom
it?
MacDonald in? Kind of
He's
independent.
independent. Yeah.
But like speaking to Maliki, sure, certainly that you can see. Look, I've as we were speaking before I came on here, I've been involved in nationalist Eurosceptic politics since 2001, Treaty of Nice, the first Nice Treaty, where I started very simply. I was a teacher, but I was giving out leaflets in the morning at train stations and putting up posters all around Dublin, trying to convince people of the importance of Irish national sovereignty and democratic self-determination. All these values I hold very dear, and I've campaigned for them for a very long time. People can go back and look at letters pages in the national papers from 2001 and 2, and you can see letters from old Hermann Kelly talking about we need to take back national self-control, and I still believe it, and I'll still make that case. But in regards, but I wasn't a member of any political party, and I was involved with political groups, core things like that. Set up our own group, Ireland Says No. Did a lot of like maybe 250,000 leaflets, got them distributed around the country. But I actually, what I noticed was these kind of set up quickly, campaign very hard, very professionally, very successfully. But then they dissolve and they don't have any because they're not kind of permanent institutions. They dissolve, disappear. They depend on kind of individual presence and personalities. That the benefit of institutions, any political party, is that it lasts longer, and is the brand is often more effective than that of an individual. So I think that's why I set up a political party, so it would endure, and the brand would be known. And like the fact is that political power in Ireland is wielded through political parties, not just through individuals or independents. But vast majority of political power is transferred and wielded by political parties, and that's why, like, to be a national, to say that I'm a nationalist but I'm an independent, well, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. You can't. The whole thing about individualism and I'll do whatever I want, and bit of a if it's just good for me, that's okay. Well, as a nationalist, it should be what's good for the whole country. And the advantage of political party is you're making up political policies for the good of the whole country, not just your individual council area or your individual constituency, but for the good of the whole country. So that's why I believe that a national political party is very important, and that's why I helped found the Irish Freedom Party, and that's why I'm still involved in the Irish Freedom Party. But I do think that people have come around, even people who ran as independents. Now, I don't want to be naming names and saying that this person said to me, but certainly people who have run as independents previously have said to me that they can increasingly see the importance of running as a nationalist political party rather than just as an individual or as an independent.
Okay, that's fair enough. When I suppose we'll wait and see in that. But based on what you're saying there, Herman, and just to broaden this out a little bit to my sense of what seems to be happening, is that Ireland First, the Irish Freedom Party, possibly even when you see the stuff that went on with Justin Barrett and all that kind of stuff with the National Party, they have been, in a sense, the claim would be infiltrated or influenced, and that my sense is there's money here and there's outside influence, possibly outside the country influence. Is that your sense of things?
I don't. Outside influence,
Well,
outside money.
let's put it this way. The way I'd frame it is that there's a specifically since Trump got elected, that there's an Irish American diaspora interest in Irish politics that is probably a little more intense. There's quite a number of kind of Irish American figures in, we'll say, both the Christian conservative and the populist movements in the States, and they're looking at what's going on in Ireland aghast, like we are. I'm not saying that these are
Yeah, I think, yeah,
necessarily nefarious influences, but
yeah.
it seems to me that is coming into play here as well.
I think you're right. Yeah, you are correct in that there is an Irish American interest in the country, which is getting better organised, and it's having a very close look at the country. And they were really, can I say, the timing of this Leahy carry on was very poor, and they weren't very enthused about this ousting and political. There's been a lot of movement within the nationalist groups over the last year, as I said there, with Finn and Nadina, with Ireland First, with the Irish Freedom Party eruptions, and they weren't very enthused about kind of this latest disruption in the Irish Freedom Party, because things were kind of coming to natural kind of melding with Stevenson, and I would suggest anyway. Certainly, relations are very friendly for sure, and that kind of
Maliki seems to have a power base behind him.
Friendship and political commonality being melded into a single political unit. I don't see why not. I think that was going to happen. So has this thing helped or hindered? I think it's more of a hindrance, because it certainly upset any Irish American focus on Ireland that was there. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I think, look, talking about unity and stuff like that, nationalist unity, yeah, it sounds great. But a political party is there to achieve political power, to wield political power, and to do that, we have to be elected. And to be elected, the experience all across Europe, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, is that the nationalist Eurosceptic parties that have got into power, be that in Britain or Germany or France or Hungary or wherever, it's based on primarily national sovereignty, belief in human nature, biology, man and woman, conservative, socially conservative, economically. Some are more liberal, some are more left wing, like in France. But what they don't have is parties that base their political policies on stuff about national purity or racial purity, or talk about the Jews, or 5G ate my hamster. They don't go on about little kind of stuff. Let's say about minority interest policies. They go on policies that affect the vast majority of the population, so that they just don't have policies on solely immigration, but they have on energy policy, taxation policy, education, parental rights and education, all these different policies. They have a broad, as we've tried to bring in the Irish Freedom Party, we have a policy document, the broad mix of policies that try to bring solutions to the problems that people experience in everyday life. And we don't go on about racial purity. We don't go on about it's all the Jews. And we try to be electable. We don't try to give people excuses not to vote for us. So we try to be self-consciously a moderate nationalist party, which doesn't get caught up in the reeds, and and we try to be electable. And because of that reason, actually, I believe that the Irish Freedom Party is simply a fact that people have looked at how the various parties in Ireland have gone on. Between 2020 and 2024, the Irish Freedom Party did better than any other political party. And relative to 2020, our vote went up more than any other party. And in absolute terms, I think we were third or fourth in regards about the increase in our absolute vote. So I believe that was so because brand is important, but this Irish Freedom Party is a moderate nationalist party. It's radical and it's like looking at the problems and giving the solutions, but a bit like Caffrey's Ale, we believe in hard words, softly spoken, and about the presentation, like I wear a suit. I normally wear a tie. It's not just a matter of people marching up and down, shouting on the street about deportations now. We have to have a broad range of policies which appeal to a broader swathe of the population, that we can actually get elected and get into power, positions of power, because we can shout out all we like on the street, but unless we change the politicians in power, the policies are not going to change. So that's the reason we have taken the path that we have over the last number of years in the Irish Freedom Party, and to be this kind of clear path of a moderate nationalist party, it means we're not going to get into bed with people who do crazy stuff or who espouse kind of racist all policies about racial purity and stuff like that. There,
Well,
we have no interest in that.
The ethno-nationalism, it doesn't, like, to me, is, I'm looking at the average. The way I look at the world at this precise moment in time is that there's about 30, maybe 40% of the population who are sitting on the fence, but they're looking around. They know things aren't right. They are, on the hot topic issues like immigration and, the trans ideology. They're every bit the same as we are. Now, what I would say is,
Gerry, can I come back on that? Yeah, you're right on, like, for example, those two issues, the immigration issue, the trans ideology issue. Yes, the general population they have changed a lot, and you can see in the polls over the last 2 or 3 years that the general opinion on those two issues has moved over here, because it's like people like in the Irish Freedom Party, etc., and others, similar nationalists as well, have been making those arguments for years, and now the general population has come over. They've accepted the arguments, but I don't think that they trust us enough yet to vote for us. They're having a look, and they're looking.
Well, I'd say they don't trust you at all. Like, after when you watch, the evidence of your eyes is you've had 3 elections. Not you. I'm not directing this specifically at you. You've had 3 elections. You've got virtually nobody elected. You've got a handful.
But wait, Gerry, now in Louth, for example, in 2020, I forget it was 3,500, 350 votes. I can't exactly remember, but anyway, our vote in County Louth, for example, in the general election, and we had a guy there, Cathal Murricu, actually, who represented the party very well when he got on to radio and made a good effort, and we, between then 2020 and 2024, our vote went up 6-fold. So in that last general election, I got 4,000 first preferences, which was
I'm not saying, but you had like
2,500 first preference, 4% of the vote. I went out in round 14 with 3,650 votes. Now, if I could push that up to 5.66%, up to 8%, I would be elected. So we're certainly getting much closer to being elected, and a 6-fold increase in the vote over 4 years is a pretty impressive stat, really. Did we get anybody elected? No nationalist candidate got elected into the Dáil in that election, be it Una Mullally or Nick Delahanty or Stephen Kerr in Mayo or Hermann Kelly in Louth. But you know what? We're getting a lot closer. We're getting a lot closer. So, hey, Rome's not going to be built in a day, and where people may have been disheartened or disheartened that there wasn't any strong nationalist elected into the Dáil, that day is coming much, much closer because of the hard work that people have put in.
I'd say I'd say the last election you had there was the opportunity of a lifetime at the election, and when you say 6-fold increase, let's look at the base you're starting at, from 2020.
Okay, so, but we ended up with 4% of the first preference vote.
Yeah, look, I'm not denying that you personally have performed well in the Euros as well. Like, to be fair, I'm not arguing that, but like, that's another example where you had about 10 loosely the same candidates running in that election.
I think it was 10 or 13 nationalist candidates.
Yeah. So like, incredible. That's indicative of bad organization or ego, or unable to come to stand aside to allow one or two candidates to make an impact. So the question for me, and I would say the question for people looking in, is really, if this 3-person committee is going to look at establishing some sort of unity across the nationalist spectrum, you really have to go back to the board on vision for a nationalist future, because everything we're talking about there is on policy. I think a lot of what's missing here is cultural nationalism. It just gets rarely spoken about by any of the political parties, as in the things as Irish people that connect us to maybe the people who just look at and hear the word nationalists and go like that, because of labeling, whatever it might be. But the ties that actually bind us as Irish people, I think the nationalist cohort could do a hell of a lot better job at kind of establishing that. Do you not think?
Well, I suppose we're all involved, like myself, my children are, even I used to be a coach in the local GA club, and my children were play in the local GA club, and they're involved in various things like that, music, playing music, Irish music and stuff like that there. So
But I
I
don't mean
think
it
a
as a
lot of people are involved in things like that. But
see that,
it's not done as a
that's not my
political
point.
party, of course. It's done as individuals.
Yeah, that's not my point. Like, that's individual. I'm not questioning people as individuals. I'm questioning it as a kind of a policy platform for nationalism. Is that there has to be much more of this positive cultural element of it, because I think it's a field that the main political parties are running away from. Like, they don't want to know
Yeah,
anything about Irishness at the moment, whether it's music, culture, or sport. It's like stuff
yeah.
they're running
Yeah,
away
no,
from.
all that, like, we have to admit that 1916, 1880, 1888, I get confused with Celtic, and I think the GA was 1884, and Celtic football team was in 1888. But anyway, the Celtic revival of the late 1880s, the cultural revival preceded the political revival and
Mm.
action, and therefore 1916, I suppose we could also say that physical revolution preceded the large political upheaval as well, if we're honest about it. But
Yeah, yeah.
certainly the cultural revival preceded that by a number of decades, worked its way through to show the people the importance of our own language, our own dance, our own music, our own literature, uh, our own language. All those things were very strong. And yeah, you're right. You're 100% right about the importance of the cultural revival. It's very, well, should I say as a politician, it's more important? Well, I can say for sure that historically it comes before the political revival, because I'm from the north, right? And it's a bit different from the south. We were actually brought up, or I was certainly brought up in Derry with a great sense of cultural superiority. I didn't have, and I was shocked when it come down south and to experience this cultural self-loathing that they have around South Dublin. And because we were brought up with this great belief and that Irish culture was fantastic, that our language was beautiful, our literature, we had the best poetry, the best literature, we had fantastic dance, and our games were fantastic. And they come down and they experience and hear all this cultural self-loathing as kind of what John has written books about D4 and stuff like that there, and Des Fennell before him. And this cultural self-loathing that they have there, which are kind of expanded via RTE and the newspapers around the whole of the country. For me, it was kind of novelty, kind of not a very pleasant novelty either. But certainly, I was brought up to be very proud Irish nationalist in Derry, and this whole thing about hating who we are as a people. Yeah, do you know what? That also is the foundation of this throwing away, because it is the grand sons and daughters of those who fought in 1916, who lived and feasted off their name, who have been the ones who've thrown away our political sovereignty by handing over political power, which belonged to the Irish people and the Irish nation, over to these rat bags in Brussels, who we didn't elect and who we can't get rid of.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. I hear you. And I would say that, like, you know, growing up in the west of Ireland and like rural Ireland and outside the Pale Ireland, let's put it that
Yeah,
way, you were either a nationalist or a Republican. There wasn't a question of whether anyone was
yeah,
a nationalist. Do you know what I mean? It was whether they were the question, like they were the question. But I suppose you brought, it wasn't. If you were a member of Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, you felt like, well, I'm a national, like that's standard. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
But I do think the reason I bring
Yeah,
that up,
well, I think, Jerry, a lot of things that were taken for granted
yeah,
30 years ago. Actually, I would say the Irish Freedom Party espouses, through its policies, both in social policies and economic policies and things to do with national sovereignty, etc. I think a lot of these things were taken for granted, like the idea that uh, men don't get pregnant, women don't have cocks, that Irish people are good enough to make their own laws and control their own borders. Like, not that many decades ago, and like, people should have freedom of speech and they shouldn't be controlled by the state. It's actually the parents who could decide the ethos of the children's education, not the state. Things that were taken for granted a number of decades ago have now been washed away. And even like in the 60s and 70s, it was always kind of the left who were in favor, the ones who were opposed to war, the ones who were in favor of free speech and against censorship. That's all completely changed now. Now it's actually the conservatives, or the libertarian conservative nationalist types, who are the ones in favor of free speech, who are opposed to war, who stand up for parental rights and education, who don't believe that like cocks and frocks walking around is a good thing. And the world, yeah, we stand up for things that people took for granted a number of decades ago. But all around the world, these values that we stand up for are very, very important. But they're rooted in Ireland, among Irish people and Irish experience. But I think that people like the ideas of our policies, but we have to make an effort to help the Irish population start to trust us. And it's not helped by these little public spats. I would agree on that for sure. Yeah.
one of the, I suppose, the early prominence of the Irish Freedom Party, if we go back pre-COVID, because you did set up in 2018,
Yeah.
is that you were platform as a party that was looking to exit the European Union, looking for Ireland to exit the European Union. So
Yeah.
is that a baseline for any negotiations with any other nationalists?
Well,
We'll say going forward.
it's still our policy. It's changed slightly in that our policy is to seek to have a referendum to give the Irish people a say: should our laws be made in Brussels or should they be made in Dáil Éireann? I would argue that they should be made in Dáil Éireann and that we're good enough to decide our own future and our own destiny. Uh,
Yeah.
I would like, if someone calls themselves a nationalist but they believe in foreign control. To me, that's a bit of a oxymoron. I'm a nationalist who believes that we're not good enough, that we have to be told by someone else what laws we have to follow. I think it's a bit ridiculous. But hey, and if you're against open border immigration, well, how can you have control? Actually, what I'll tell you, I think it's one achievement of the Irish Freedom Party, our large contribution over the last 6 years or whatever, is that we have highlighted continually since the beginning that our problem in immigration isn't illegal immigration of people coming in claiming to be refugees and give us free stuff. It's actually the main driver of immigration into Ireland is actually completely legal. Open EU open borders, free movement, that's a main driver of immigration into Ireland. And it's compounded recently and even more in the last number of years by the Irish government throwing out work permits for a population of 5.3 million in Ireland. They have 40,000 work permits per year, and for half of those 20,000 people get family reunification on top of that. So it's actually fully legal immigration, which is the main driver of immigration into Ireland. I think that's a big contribution that the Irish Freedom Party has made, because I think the press always try to get nationalists to run down into the dark path of just, they talk about immigration, they talk about refugees and asylum seekers, where if you look at the EPS numbers given out every year, be 240 to 300,000 per year, less than 24% of those were actually given to Irish people. So you can see that the main driver if there's only 30,000 asylum seekers coming per year, well, the vast majority of those are through legal means of EU open borders and work permits. So I think we've been able to contribute in that. But you know what? I also will be talking to people. I know that this committee, Michael Leahy, will be talking to various people, and we wish everybody the best. But
Have you
the idea that the Irish Freedom Party, we didn't go into that. Let's say it wasn't a single political party they founded. It was kind of like an electoral pact called the National Alliance. There, it was before the general election. We didn't go into it. Why didn't we go into it? Because there was no single political party. It was like it was a brand which hadn't any agreed policies. They were more than happy to run, say, against the Irish Freedom Party in every constituency they could. They also ran against every independent nationalist with a very good chance of being elected, be it Stephen Kerr, Una Mullally, Nick Delahanty, etc. They put up some people who were, I thought, not the highest of standard of candidates, but they're more than happy to run against us. Although, for example, the Irish Freedom Party, we didn't run against people like Maliki Stein or Gavin Pepper or Derek Bly because we thought they were good candidates and they had a good chance. And why would we try to jump in selfishly and disrupt them? So we didn't that, and we get very little kudos or kind of pats in the back for that. But we didn't run against candidates who we believed who were good quality candidates who had a good chance of being elected. But this National Alliance we're more than happy to run against good independents and ourselves. However, it blew up very soon after the general election, and the National Party have put out a statement about it that they have no interest in this idea of like this kind of group with no tight political agreed policies. And well, that's their choice to make. But we didn't get involved because we believe in the importance of a brand name and a clear policy platform. People, when you go to the door, people will ask, "What's your name? What do you call your party? What are their policies?" And if you can't say, "Our party name is this," or "This is our candidate," "These are our policies," you're on a road to nowhere. And I think that's why the Irish Freedom Party, of all the nationalist parties, did the best in the general election.
Well, what I'd say to you is, well, okay, how you frame that to yourself is your business. Like, I wouldn't agree. Like, I would agree that you had some success.
But that's what the stats show, Jay. It's just not my opinion. I think I'm wonderful. That's what the statistics of the last general election show.
Yeah. Like, if that's what you call success, is what I mean. Like, and I want, like, this is what I would mean.
It's a road. It's a road toward a greater success. And the thing is, Rome's not going to be built in a day. But there is long before Michael Leahy started making noises, there was a general move towards greater friendship
I want to get
etc.
I want to get off this topic because I think we've covered to death. I want to bring you back to COVID at the beginning, because one of the things I felt that the Irish Freedom Party weren't out the gate fast on, especially the vaccines. Now, you got your act together pretty quick, but I think, would you agree with that system? You mentioned something there about 5G, like, and I actually think 5G, satellite, all that stuff, there's a big issue there. I would agree
but it's
with
just
you.
the general population.
I agree with you, but I would say that's not a small issue. And there's, just like we'll say climate manipulation, which 2 years ago was really out there conspiracy theory, is moving more and more towards being probably a fact. So, like, to say, and where that conversation might be in 2 years' time, I would say political parties like yourselves will have to think about.
Well, you certainly have a point because, for example, say a member of the party mentioned about fluoride in the water, right? Regarded it's one of those crazy conspiracy theories. And actually, when I went and looked at it and read it and read the research on it, I thought, well, that person's right. That it is fluoride in the water is dangerous. It's a toxin for the mind and for formation of young children's brains is very dangerous up to the age of 2, and it shouldn't be in. It's better that it's not in the water. And actually, Ireland, I believe, is the only country in the whole of Europe which legally mandates the introduction of mandatory fluoride in the water. I believe it's dangerous, and I believe we have a policy to oppose that. There's other things that are coming up, and as things come out, yeah, I believe we're actually pretty kind of quick out of the traps on
Well,
to
I think
oppose
you're.
to oppose the lockdown, to impose, and we were on a point of principle. We opposed any idea of mandatory vaccination, that people should be free to decide what
You were
goes into
good
the
on the
body,
pass.
and
You were good on the vaccine passport. Like I'm not arguing, but what I would have said is you weren't against the idea of like, and I'm not saying like not many people know. Looking now, it's like it's easy for me to say it in hindsight. But what I would have said was that in a situation like that, in any situation where there is complete political agreement, that's the moment to take the step in the opposite direction, because history tells us disaster
well,
unfolds.
we
Like,
came out as a party. We came out very early against any idea of mandatory vaccination. We opposed the lockdown. We opposed the lockdown. Actually, I was prosecuted by the state for organising a rally in November 2020 against the lockdown. We had a number of rallies around the country to oppose the lockdown. We are also very clear that we opposed any idea of mandatory vaccination. It was up to people themselves. Because think about it, if you allow the state to mandate or dictate to you what you must take inside your body, look, any notion of freedom is completely gone. So we oppose that. And if you look up the press at the minute about anti-vax this, anti-vax groups, we're listed as one of those, one of the very few political parties. And also this idea of the lockdown, that you can't go to work, the state should have the power to dictate where you travel. If you see your family, can you go to work? We opposed all that as well, very, very clearly. And actually, as I said, I was prosecuted for it.
mhm. No, no,
And
that's fair.
and also, Jerry, like say, what do you call her, Dolores Cahill, who was at the time professor of UCD. She spoke against the whole thing very, very clearly in Ireland, and actually got a pretty international following about it. So, and I myself, I've worked for Christian Therese, who's a Romanian MEP, who was extremely vocal. There was only a small group of 7 MEPs, maximum 12, out of 470 in the European Parliament, who stood up and opposed the COVID cert, any idea of mandatory vaccination, and the lockdown. And he did it in principle, and he fined a lot of money for coming into Parliament without any COVID cert. So I worked for him, advised him, and got him a lot of publicity. And we actually made, I think, quite a significant input into the ideas that were circulating against the lockdown.
Okay. Just one point. I suppose a lot of what we're talking about here is, and one point I don't want to miss on, because I want to ask you, like, as you know, as a, a nationalist grouping, whatever happens with all of these parties, is the excess deaths the excess deaths that people like Patrick E. Walsh have put at over 20,000 people since the vaccination rollout. Is accountability for that high on your priority list as nationalists?
Well, I'll tell you, and this is a point in favour of Michael Leahy, which I'm very happy to say, is that the Irish Freedom Party was the first party, and Michael Leahy was the one who researched the statistics, and he was 100% correct. He went through RAP.ie, and I think as a CSO, can't remember the dollar source of figures, and basically worked out that at the time Ireland had an excess mortality rate of, I believe, 16.5%. And he got those statistics correct months before anybody else even thought of looking at them and publicizing them. So we're proud of that fact. We drew attention, and actually Christian Therese, the MEP that I worked for, drew attention that that the countries with the lowest vaccination rate had the highest, lowest vaccination rate had the highest infection mortality rate as well. Ireland, which had a very high vaccination rate, had a very excess deaths. I believe in January 22, it was, I believe it was 25% in Ireland, which is colossal, right? And there should be a Dr. Pat Morrissey, who's a member and was a member of the Irish Freedom Party at the time, was also vocal against the whole thing of mandatory vaccination and the lockdown. So we have spoken against it, but we're not members of the medical council. But we have had
No, but you have
members,
a voice.
we've had Gerry Waters there, who ran for us in the general election in Kildare North. He was very vocal about standing up for the right of doctors in the doctor-patient relationship is crucial, and there must be consequences, and there should be a public inquiry into what happened during this COVID time, and there should be consequences, both not only for the doctors who put up, who were pushing this, but also the civil servants and the politicians who were pushing these harmful ideas, which impacted a lot of people. And you know what? A lot of people lost their jobs and became alcoholics, and some people died because of their policies. And there should be ramifications. And we've run candidates in the last general election who've said that very, very clearly.
Okay, I want to ask you a question now, because there's a very topical point of discussion on the doctors front. We have a former member of the Irish Medical Council, Marcus de Bruin. I interviewed him here last week, and he's being a fitness to practice inquiry in a few weeks. Are the elected national politicians going to make noise? Can you yourself, because you have quite a bit of, I'll put it separate to your political career. You're 15 years in the belly of the beast, we'll say, working as communications director out in the European Union, and that grouping of about 40 MEPs that you kind of help out with communications. Are you as nationalists willing to kind of, especially the elected ones and the ones with influence, willing to kind of publicize, horrors like this, where a man who's calling out a nursing home scandal during the pandemic, trying to publicize it, and is now facing the very same medical council trying to take away his license?
Well, I was happy that Gerry Waters, the doctor who ran for us, and publicised these very things during the general election. And as you're right, working in the European Parliament, I've worked for MEPs and groups who have pushed very strongly against the lockdown. My MEP was fined a lot. He was the only MEP out of 474 who, on a point of principle, refused in any way to do the COVID certificate. And stood up for a patient, the integrity of their body, that they couldn't be compelled to take vaccines or foreign bodies inside their body. Is this thing, well, it's Marcus de Bruin in it.
Yeah.
I've met him actually in one of the anti-lockdown rallies in Dublin. Very nice guy, very genuine, and his family depend on him being able to support him, and he's 100% correct in what he said then. He drew attention to something which is an absolute scandal, and yet, as a party and as a nationalist, the MEP I work for at the minute is a Danish MEP. I worked for Christian Therese before, but basically they're all very similar, and they believe that the individual, not the state, should be the arbiter of what to do with their body, and that they wouldn't accept that even on a point of principle, this idea of mandatory vaccination and mandatory lockdown is actually repugnant. For example, I believe as an individual, and well, even the American presidents there have said about the greater the size of the government, the less freedom that you have. That's our basic guiding principle.
Okay.
I would hold to that.
I suppose to take it, I kind of want to finish off
because
Jerry,
it's no good getting out of Brussels control and then saying, "Oh, but we have our government, and the Irish government in Dublin is going to dictate every facet of your life." That's not our policy. Is to have a free people and a free country, not to be dictated to by the state, even if it's in Dublin.
Yeah, well, basically what I'm hearing here is that the European Union, the European Commission, the European Parliament is not fixable. Kind of, I think most people, if they had most people would like to just go back to a free trade situation, and
well, it's like that thing about making false political promises that so Leahy was that the EU is not up for reform. Britain tried to reform the EU for decades, got absolutely nowhere. Then they left. The EU only goes in one direction. That's ever closer union. It says so in black and white from the very beginning. Ever closer union. That means it's going to become a centralized political union where the political power based in Brussels, taken away from the nation state. It's like the ratchet mechanism, as they call it here in Brussels. Once the EU takes power, it never relinquishes that political power. And in matters of EU competence, EU law is superior to Irish law, the Irish Supreme Court, Irish Constitution. That's why I find it absolutely repugnant. You can't be an Irish Republic or like a democratic country and a member of the European Union at the same time. The EU is not open for reform. The EU only goes to deeper integration into a single unified state, and I'm completely opposed to that.
Okay. I just want to step it out of Ireland and back into your career. Like, you spent 10 years working with Nigel Farage, and I just wanted to get an idea of how he influenced your political thinking and what you actually look at now when you look across the Irish Sea and you see the UK Reform Party at 27%. What is there? Are there things to be learned there, or what have you learned from working with him during those 10 years?
Well, politically, how he affected me my political formation was done in the Bogside rather than over in Brussels. And like I remember at school, sixth form, I went to St. Colm's College in Derry, and when the teacher wasn't there in the sixth form centre in the study area or whatever, guys would get up on the table and they would do famous political speeches by Padraig Pearse or James Connolly or whoever, and that they would have learned off by heart. That's political formation that I had. And then, of course, reading the collected works of Padraig Pearse in the local library in Derry, Foyle Road, when I was 15 or so. And that's basis on and what I experienced of, for example, having greenhouse in our house smashed up by the British Army as they were going around with their dogs sniffing for guns and bombs in the back garden. And smashing up the house just out of badness, just because we were Fenians and they were British soldiers. And they thought, the idea of foreigners come and dictating what you should do in your own country was repugnant. So that's why I've always been opposed to foreign.
Given what you've just said there, it's kind of unusual to go. It would be kind of unusual to go and work for any type of UK political party, given that early experience. I'm just wondering what that was about. Like,
I was head of communications for the EFDD group, which was, I think, 7 different nationalities and 47 different MEPs that ended up as predominantly UKIP MEPs, of which Nigel Farage was the vice president, along with an Italian MEP. What I learned from him is actually the whole importance. It's just not nationalist, but also the freedom of the person. That's why I always say about a free people in a free country, and about I was kind of already that before he even went about the parental rights in education, like homeschooling, for example, is very important point of principle that the parents are in charge of the choice of the children's education, not the big state. But what I learned from him, they also had a very large start. It took UKIP 25 years to go from their formation to having a referendum and to having it passed. 25 years is a hell of a lot longer than 6 or 7 years that the Irish Freedom Party has had.
Yeah.
And on top of that, 25 years that UKIP had, after he left, he then formed the Brexit Party and then the Reform Party. Well, it does show to me actually the importance of having money to be able to act politically, because it's very difficult to do so without it. And secondly, that the political landscape in Britain is different because they have a much more varied media landscape. So they have nationalist-friendly Eurosceptic press like the Telegraph, the the Sun, the Spectator magazine, things like that, which we don't have in Ireland at all. So there's no, I don't think there's any Irish media outlet, and that includes Grip, who never have the Irish Freedom Party on, because I refused. They asked me to be their spokesman. The McMahon family for this core group, I think it was during Lisbon one, and I refused. They hated me ever since. So you never see about the Irish Freedom, or very rarely ever see the Irish Freedom Party mentioned on this Grip media, and that's why I will never subscribe to it. Talk about independence media. Well, it would be nice if they were independent of their owners, Mike Mahona family. But Ireland sadly has a dearth of independent, large-scale media operations. So we don't have what they have in Britain, that kind of any sympathetic media. So it makes it difficult. Look, even
So
for me in the general election.
So just to clarify what you just said, you're not a fan of Gript.
No.
Are you a fan of?
Well, they're certainly not a fan of the Irish Freedom Party. They will not. They rarely ever present the Irish Freedom Party on Grip Media, and that's why I will never take out a subscription to Grip Media.
Okay, no, I'm not I'm not encouraging you to do that. But what I'm saying
I'd rather watch you,
is,
Gerry. I'd rather watch you.
But I would have imagined you have, like, the way I piece Grip together is it kind of came out of the abortion referendum, and like they should really be aligned to you, because if you're
Of course you should. Of course you should, actually, because the Mahoonies are quite Republican. They have the same political views as me, but it's just that the personal hatred, animosity towards me, because I wouldn't be their little, fluffer, that they like to control, like they like to replicate their family life of weak man, the kind of feral woman, and they will dictate, they will get a beta male like John McGurk, and they will dictate to him what he should do and think. Well, I'm not that type of guy, so hey, maybe they're right.
Well, somebody who is a fan of yours, or historically was a fan of yours, is Declan Ganley, and he was an early supporter of, like, it's public knowledge that he supported the salary of John McGurk in the early years to get that off the ground.
Well, I don't know that. I've heard that as a rumor, so I can't comment.
And well, we'll put it this way: John McGurk was a VP of communications for Rivada Networks.
That's true.
For a period of time that he was also the editor of Gript. I'm not saying how long, but like that, that's out there, and that is history. But what I would say is, I would have thought that I came across an article where I think Declan Ganley, I don't know, he sued the Village magazine or one of those magazines, and whatever happened, there was a right of reply. It was 2012, and they were kind of haggling over who would interview Declan, and the prominent names listed were Eamon Dunphy and some RTE presenter, but your name was in there back in 2012. So obviously you're friendly, like, or obviously
I'm friendly with Declan Ganley. Yeah, like we have different political views. Like we had actually a public debate in Galway there, I think it was 2019 maybe, about Ireland would be in or out of the European Union. He debated to be to remain in. I wanted to leave. So like we're friendly as people, but we have different political views.
Yeah, that's fair.
And we maybe on cultural stuff to do with Catholic faith and social policy, we have very, very similar views. So, hey, we're not the same people.
Yeah. No, that brings an interesting question when you're bringing through this cohort of Irish nationalists as they exist in whatever form they exist, is that, there'd be an element of there'd be an element of the nationalist movement that would be very much to the right, the Ganley Christian conservative, and there'd be the Maliki Stein nationalist, I would view as more closer to traditional socialist kind of trade unionist type of politics. Will it be possible to get?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be speaking for him, because I know his views have, because I know his views have changed strongly over the years, and certainly his political affiliation with, and maybe not just political affiliation, with various Republican groups has changed over. He's not shy about it, so But certainly Maliki, I don't think he's I don't think he's left wing. He's he's pro-life, and he believes that workers should be rewarded for the work, and there should be a relationship. I certainly don't think he's in favour of like some kind of national socialism, and the state will dictate and pay the wages of all the workers. I don't think that's on the offering.
No,
But hey, let him have him on and speak to him
I
yourself.
can't imagine
But
himself
like he's a self-employed lawyer, solicitor.
No,
He certainly
absolutely.
believes up. He gets up in the morning, goes to work, and he gets paid. And
Absolutely.
I don't think he's a big state socialist.
No. What I mean, what I'm really getting at is that there are spectrums of ideology on the national
absolutely, absolutely.
And will those kind of historic ideological positions get in the way of people coming together, or do you think they won't?
Well, you know what? We were talking earlier on here about how in polls the opinion of the general population on immigration and trans issue has changed dramatically over the last number of years. And I think the Irish Freedom Party and others close to us have had a dramatic impact. So I think we're swaying on things like freedom of speech, right to bodily autonomy, parental rights and education, energy, small state, low tax. I think that we're had an impact on the formation of public opinion. But as I said, I don't think that people trust us yet to give it as a political party. But I think that hopefully will increase with time and with greater unity, which I think will do good, because the fracturing of everybody into, especially the independents and everybody doing their own thing, that's not Hermann Kelly's fault, irrespective of what Michael Leahy believes. People doing their own thing is like, the reason that Michael Mullally or Stephen Kerr didn't get elected, it wasn't because of Hermann Kelly, or Maliki Stein didn't get elected. That was my fault. If people go off, do their own thing and fracture and run as independents, there's nothing I can do about that. It's not necessarily my fault. People make the choices, and I can't force everybody. And Mike Leahy will find that as well, that this idea is going to get everybody, this promise is going to get everybody into one tent. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, so I suppose the next step, are you hopeful that you will be a central part of the Irish Freedom Party in 3 months' time?
I will be, yeah.
Okay. I suppose we're running at the hour.
Actually, do you know what? Derek Bly put up a very kind video there during the week, and he said, Hermann Kelly's been at this a long time, and when you're all huffing and puffing on the street and you're tired and you feel you've done your part, Hermann Kelly will still be here doing his part for Ireland. So that part is absolutely true. Yeah, I'll not be walking away anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's. I think I know. I just.
I like the abuse. I'm a masochist.
I think you're. You want to be careful. You don't get addicted to it. Right. Herman, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Gerry. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for asking me to come on.
Thanks for your time, because I know you're busy. So we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone
for
tuning in, and